Welcome to the Business as Mission podcast, dedicated to those who long to see God glorified in business and the nations reached for Christ. Your host is Mike Bayer, longtime BAM leader and founder of Third Path Initiative, an online education resource for starting and growing BAM businesses around the world.
So welcome to another episode of the Business as Mission podcast. I am excited to be here with Ryan and Rebecca Stowell. They'll tell their story. I won't try to tell it, but they are in Chiang Mai, Thailand, one of my all-time favorite cities on the planet. And they are involved in the coffee business, not in a coffee shop business, which is what so many people would think of, but they're really inside the coffee business with a calling to make a difference for the farmers and their families, and I'll let them tell the rest of it. So welcome, first of all, Ryan and Rebecca. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So Ryan told me when we were just getting started, he says, I'm nervous. I have stage fright. Is this live? And I told him no, but it is. No, I'm kidding. It's not. It's just a chat with friends and getting to know you guys. But when we talk about the Business as Mission podcast, just so you'll know, we call it BAM stories because we're not interested so much in trying to reiterate the theology of business or even business strategy. We really are wanting to hear your story. God's done some things. He's calling you guys to Thailand. He's introduced you to people that led you into the coffee business. There's a story here, and that's really what we want to hear and learn about and be able to encourage you guys. So feel free to share whatever you want. But let's start with a question of how did you get from the U.S. to Chiang Mai in the first place?
Rebecca and I met at Colorado Christian University a long time ago. What was that, 92?
92.
And anyway, we got married in 94, and I had just come back from a missions trip, a short-term trip to Papua New Guinea with New Tribes Mission in 1990. And I was super fired up about doing something involving missions someday. And I didn't know how, I didn't know when. I met Rebecca, and when I proposed to her, I said, listen, before you say yes, if you say yes, I hope you say yes. If you say yes, just know that if God calls us to go overseas, are you willing to go? And she said yes. And then God decided to grow us up another 17 years before we felt like we really had a calling. So we got involved in my family's restaurant business in Salida, Colorado. It's called the Country Bounty Restaurant. And did everything. You know, I grew up in that business. I mentioned earlier, Rebecca grew up in the greenhouse business in Alaska. And so we both came from business backgrounds, just family businesses. You know, we were, doing our after school job, weekend job since, we were quite young. So anyway, it was in our blood. But anyway, we really felt called to Thailand in 2012. There was an organization looking for a business manager for a conference retreat center. So long story short, we left everything behind in Salida and ran after that calling. And we said, we're going to be here 3 years. Feel free to jump in if I'm missing any parts of this. Okay. So anyway, we jumped right in headlong. And anyway, in the process of our first assignment here, we met Lopa and Bairak from the Aka people group. They were both refugees from Burma. Now it's Myanmar. There was a big, when the Golden Triangle was kind of in the biggest activity of the drug years, there was a lot of fighting between the Shan and the Wa army. Those two armies were fighting each other, and both were also fighting the Burmese army. A lot of Hill Tribe people groups were caught in the crossfire of all of this. It was a very difficult time. And so about 1 million people crossed the border into Thailand. Anyway, fast forward to now, they've managed to get their citizenship. Their kids have their citizenship, but there are kids within their ministry, I should call it our ministry that we're all doing together, who are stateless and marginalized and have a very difficult time accessing education unless they live at a dorm. So Lopa and Bairak had this vision to start a dorm with almost no budget. And that's when we met them. And that's when we realized this is what God has called us to Thailand for. So you might be wondering, well, what does this have to do with business? Well, we jumped into
let me ask you another question first, though. When you say a dorm, most of us from the West are thinking college dorm, boarding school dorm. Is that the kind of living arrangement that you're talking about, or is it more of a kid's home? Because you're obviously, when you use the term stateless, it intrigues me that, what would it be to be stateless? No citizenship anywhere, and all that we're so used to with that, whether Thai or American. So go back and just unpack that a little bit more for us. A dorm, what it means to these kids, what their situation is.
So yeah, it is a kids' dorm, and very, very basic. We've tried hard to let their culture lead it, and we don't want to Americanize it too much or at all. We want it to be, an organic relationship where they have a lot of input and a lot of say in the direction of the dorm. To be stateless basically means having no citizenship in any country, and basically opens up a person to a lot of vulnerabilities that, those of us who are passport holders, citizens of a country, we have protections, we have rights, and all kinds of resources. And, I would say as an American citizen, I have incredible amounts of resources, even here in Chiang Mai through the U.S. consulate. So yeah, to not have citizenship anywhere places children who are living in abject poverty in a very vulnerable situation. I think this is a stat that comes from IJM, but most of the people who are lulled into trafficking, whether it's labor or sex trafficking, are stateless. Many of them are stateless, and it's because they don't have the laws to protect them.
Almost like they don't exist, right? Just not like non-persons from that sense.
Right. So if you're a bad person doing really bad things, you're going to look for people who are not trackable.
Yeah. So you're called to really work among them. That's where this began, and so you were transitioning into how did business come into this? But just to underscore, we work a lot with Freedom Business Alliance, and I'm familiar with IGM and have known some of their staff over the years, and every time it seems like these days we're talking about business anywhere in the world, but particularly Southeast Asia, human trafficking comes up.
Yeah,
it's just such a scourge, and so I appreciate the fact that God led you to engage in that, into I guess a part of that world to make a difference in the lives of these kids. So thank you for that. All right, so you were going into the whole. All right, so here we go to business part. So you were turning the chapter for us.
Yeah, and so I'll just kind of dovetail on what you just said about when it comes to human trafficking. There's different approaches when people are fighting against it, and a lot of people go after the bad guys, or they want to rescue the people who are involved in it. And there's certainly a lifetime of work, an endless amount of work in that arena. But our angle is prevention. We'd like to say that our place in fighting against human trafficking is empowering the young kids who go to the dorm. There's 33 that go there right now, giving them an understanding that God loves them and God has a purpose for their life, giving them a place of love and protection where they can grow and be nurtured. And we have an education fund that if they should want to pursue education beyond high school, there's some scholarship funds that help them to pursue that. But anyway, as we journeyed through this, we were on the missionary model, and we were raising support. We still are. We'd love to be able to transition over and be able to come up with our own income. As I said before, Rebecca and I both grew up in family businesses, and working in a family business is in our DNA. So we would love to work towards that goal of slowly weaning away from the missionary model and creating our own income and creating jobs for a significant number of people in the community, whether it's coffee sorting or buying parchment from the farmers. So maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Basically, as we were working in this dorm ministry, we started to get to know some of the family members of the kids. And this common theme was, I'm a coffee farmer. I don't have a great place to sell my coffee. Will you help me find a market for my coffee? And so
we would look at each other and be like, we don't know Pour us some coffee beans.
Yeah, I mean, I love coffee. I drink coffee every day, but it just seemed overwhelming because we had so much work on our plates with the ministry, and Anyway, I think God just kept knocking on our hearts, just saying, "I'm trying to tell you something." And so there was this business opportunity just right there before us. And so when we got stuck in the States during COVID, we were trying to get back to Thailand. The doors slammed shut. We were like, "Oh my gosh, this is terrible." And we were our first reaction was, "This is awful. What are we going to do? We're stuck. We're just spinning our wheels here." And then it was pretty clear that it didn't take very long. God showed us that this is the opportunity for you to make the transition, start going down that path of transitioning from a ministry style of work to a business as mission style of work. So while we were stuck in the States, we talked to the mission committee from Rebecca's sending church, the one that Larry Sharp came from. And one of the guys on the board there, he was like, "Hey, have you ever heard of IBEC?" We're like, "I think so. We know Larry Sharp. I know of him. Her family knows him." And so anyway, the guy on the board, Steve Beeson, he said, "Yeah, check him out." Because we basically gave them in our head sales pitch or our pitch deck. We didn't have any big presentation, but we just kind of lined out, "Hey, we think God's giving us an opportunity, and here's why." And anyway, so he mentioned that. We were stuck. We just started walking down the path. We took the Third Initiative courses. It actually turned out to be a beautiful time to just stop what we were doing and start going down the path of writing a business plan and going through that whole process, which we had never done before.
What a beautiful perspective on, what disrupted the entire world. And seeing it in the big picture, obviously God's hand, but in the smaller picture, in your world, how God used all of that to give you the time to do what you needed to do, the space to do it. It sounds like the confirmation of what you were all thinking and praying and preparation to now go back at it strong. Rebecca, you just started to say something. I think I might have cut you off.
Yeah, it was great too, because we had local staff in place, local paid staff all in place at the dorm. So they were able to just run everything. We had meetings weekly with them online, but it was a huge blessing.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that because I thought, wow, what, you got this work with these kids and, as you say, 33 of them in this building and obviously serving them in amazing ways, and you can't get there. So that answers the question. But again, what a beautiful thing that God was ahead of you in the entire story, which is
absolutely,
that seems to be the common theme I hear all the time, is that I had this plan, I had this timing, I did this preparation, and God did all this other stuff. And it's just amazing.
Right.
Yeah, it seemed like a disaster, but it was absolutely a blessing to get stuck.
So when did you get unstuck?
So last year, I guess in the spring, about May, we finally were able to get our green light to get back into Thailand. We had to quarantine 14 days before they let us back into the country, actually.
Well, yeah, we had to quarantine in Bangkok. When we arrived at the airport, they took us in hazmat suits in a van to the hotel that was assigned to us, and we could not leave our room for 14 days.
Oh, I know. I've heard that story too. Oh,
yeah. So yeah, that got us unstuck. And so our ACA partner, Lopa, we've known, since the first year we met him. He's an entrepreneur through and through. He's always looking for ways to sell a crop, a plant, a starter, a house. It's in his DNA to be an entrepreneur. So he was the director of this dorm. And we kept thinking, this is really not his forte. I mean, he can do it, but
he has the vision.
He has the vision for it. But man, he's got so much skill in business. So yeah, so it didn't take too many conversations to realize, we need to go into this business together. And so he's an incredible builder. He has done a lot of the building projects and is just a really wise person when it comes to making a lot of the business decisions. His heart language is Aka, and so the farmers, that's their heart language. In this particular area that we're working in, one particular mountain has 4 Aka villages. There's probably about 200 farmers on this one mountain. So just the short of the long is this opportunity has helped us go from a ministry that we would have been happy doing our entire life. But God saw that, there's actually a way to go to reach farther, to go more to a more deep place in the community if you cross this divide and get into business as well. So the short of the long is that we're able to spend a lot more time with the farmers, with the kids' parents, with their uncles and aunts and cousins, in the context of learning how to raise good coffee, to raise good coffee plants, to good practices that result in specialty grade coffee that's scoring high.
We'll be right back after a short break.
Let's back up and take a look at the business itself, because I know, and we were talking about this earlier, that so often in the BAM, the greater BAM community, the missionary community, somebody says we're in the coffee business, and they immediately think, you've opened up a little coffee shop and you have a folk singer in the corner singing Christian songs, and that's kind of the image everybody gets. And that's not what you're doing. So when you say you're working in the coffee business and you're engaging the community, you're engaging the farmers, tell us a little bit more about the business itself.
Yeah, so we're right in the thick of it right now, trying to figure out, well, how do we engage with farmers that really care about their product? Because Thailand is, according to Bill Kennedy, who's the CEO of San Franciscan Roaster Company, he said this is the last area of the world that has not been developed as far as coffee goes. It's the last part of the coffee belt that has not been fully developed. So it's like a frontier. It's still a coffee frontier. And there's a lot that still needs to be done, a lot of development. So anyway, that's kind of exciting. And it's also frustrating because coffee was kind of planted by the government, or kind of forced on the mountain people when opium was eradicated. And so the locals, the mountain people coming from a very poor economic class, they were actually in a very lucrative crop, opium, and then that was all cut down and burned up, and then they were told, you will now plant coffee, or plant whatever you want, but here's coffee plants. So they started planting coffee, and they just they knew how to farm, but they didn't drink coffee. They didn't really understand coffee. They're disconnected from social media in the world, so they don't know that it's the second most traded commodity in the world, most likely. Yeah. A lot of them don't. And so as a result, when harvest time comes, they know these companies want X amount of kilos of coffee. And so they go through and they strip pick. 70% of the cherries might be ready to be picked, but there's 30% that are unripe, and ultimately create a bad cup of coffee. So I've talked to a lot of people who have said, yeah, I've had Thai coffee and it's pretty awful. Yeah. But the truth is, it's because there's practices that are being done throughout the process they're not up to speed. They're not being done at a high level. And in the future, through education, they're going to have this understanding, and they're starting to taste their own coffee. We're starting to spend more time cupping coffee with them, letting them taste coffee from other countries. How does your coffee taste compared to this African, this Ethiopian coffee, or this Colombian coffee? So they're starting to. There's a handful of farmers that we're working with right now. And let me just be clear: we're a very small startup. I don't know how big we're going to scale someday, but at this point, we're very grassroots, just getting started. We have about 5 farmer friends that probably produce about 2,000 kilos of coffee per year. And some of their relatives are getting interested in working with us as well.
I guess you're focusing on bringing the best practices to bear to teach and coach and so forth. I mean, is that the essence of what you're doing? It doesn't sound like you're in the buying and selling end of the business, or at least not yet. And maybe you don't intend to. It sounds like let's take what could be a great product and really teach the people how to make it that. Am I reading you correctly?
Yeah, to fill in some of the gaps, we're actually supplying roasting beans, green coffee to two fairly large roasters in Chiang Mai.
Okay.
And we're in the process of exporting about 1,600 kgs of coffee over to America. Bella Goose Coffee has been an incredible partner. They've been very supportive in our role in what we're doing through buying our green coffee in Chiang Mai. And on good faith, they said, well, we want to buy some for America as well. So put a pallet on for us. So they're helping us, kick the door open and stub our toes through the process of export.
So you really are very much into the entire supply, not the entire, but most of the supply chain.
Yeah, so we are, and there is that opportunity there. We do want to grow that, but probably right now our main focus is finding customers that want roasted coffee, whether it be businesses or offices or organizations here in Chiang Mai, because we have a roaster. We're getting our professional roasting certifications in about 2 weeks. We're training Lopaz's son, Whit, who's 25, to be our head roaster. So we really want we want their face to be on this company. We want them to really take pride in their heritage, their people, their culture, and just what God is doing in and through them as a people group.
So when you look down the road, and it's never fair to say what is the grand vision, but through the mist, what do you see beginning to form up in front of you? What is it that's exciting your heart? I mean, you just went there. Part of it is to really give the face of the company to the people. And so, and that's a beautiful thing that they take an ownership and a pride and an excitement in it. But as you look forward, and I'm not asking you to put another business plan in place, but as you guys pray together and talk together and dream a little bit together, what are some of the things that you see coming?
We're right at that point in the startup where we're like, what have we gotten ourselves into?
So maybe through the mist, you just see there's light at the end of the tunnel. That's what it is right now.
Yeah, but Mike, seriously, there's a lot of hope. There's great hope for all kinds of fruit that could come out of this. We love the idea of the for-profit Seed of Hope Coffee Company working in parallel with Seed of Hope nonprofit, and the two supporting one another. So by starting the business, we haven't run away from the work we had before, but we've handed over our directorship to a Thai couple, and they're doing a great job. And so it's given them a chance to exercise their gifts as leaders, while we get to get our feet wet in the business world in Thailand with our other Thai partners. Really a platform for discipleship and just organic relationships, relating and working. Basically, Rebecca and I have talked about this a lot before. Just we want to do life with them in such a way that they just see that we are disciples of Jesus. We're not perfect. We every day come back to the same place. God, what do you have for us today? We want to come to you for wisdom, and we just want to do life with them in that way, so that others will want to get on board.
Yeah.
And just whether they're a coffee farmer, whether they work at the dorm or they work in this, a secular place, that God goes with us wherever we go. And so I'd say that's our number one hope, is that people will see Christ shining through us, and it will just create opportunities for just great relationship, and that it would go to the next generation and the next.
You just gave probably one of the simplest and best definitions of business as mission I've ever heard. It is exactly what you two just described and where your heart is. So that's so encouraging. And how big it gets or how small it stays is very secondary to that heart. So thank you for sharing that. That's tremendous.
Thank you.
So can I buy a cup of Seed of Hope coffee anywhere?
Well, I hope so.
I mean, I'll come to Chiang Mai. I will be in Chiang Mai, and I'm coming to your house, and we're going to have some coffee. But
yes.
But how can our listeners participate in what you're doing? Obviously, they can pray for you, but how can they help open markets for you?
Yeah, at this point, I would say just a lot of prayer, and just making the right connections with the right people. I hope that you can buy coffee in Wisconsin by next year, in Littleton, Colorado. We've got 2 roasters that are buying a significant amount to roast there. And I don't know what God's going to do with that, if that's going to grow and if that market will grow, or we might just decide to really focus on roasted coffee right here in Chiang Mai. I think the main thing is we don't want to get our eye off the ball, and that's living in community with this group of Aka people on a mountain called Doi Mon Lan.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So we'll start wrapping up here because we try to keep this sort of drive time length for people to listen to on their when they're on their way to the office, assuming they ever get back to the office. We'll see how that goes. But in working through this, what would you say would be I'll ask you three questions together. One is, what's the biggest challenge that you faced? Secondly, what's the greatest blessing that you've experienced thus far? And I hope it's just the beginning of much, much more. And then third question is just what advice would you give to somebody who was thinking about doing business as mission in a cross-cultural context? You're doing it. Your story is it's not the missionary turned business person. It's the business person turned missionary turned business person, which is kind of a cool story. So what's just very briefly, what's been the biggest challenge that you guys have faced in getting this up and running? Because you just mentioned, what have we gotten ourselves into? I know that feeling.
Yeah, I think we're kind of, like Ryan shared earlier, we're kind of at a point that just feels kind of overwhelming. Like, what have we done? So I think just the marketing and just figuring out all of that stuff over here, and who are we going to sell to? Who wants to buy our green coffee? Who wants to buy our roasted coffee? That feels like a very huge challenge.
Yeah.
And I would just add to that, just doing business in a foreign country, Thai is our second language. We'll probably always need to be studying Thai because it's a tough language, and there's all the cultural nuances, so just trying to start up a company, you bump into a few more problems than you would if you're starting a company in your hometown or whatever.
Yeah.
That can be frustrating.
I think we underestimate that a lot in terms of just how difficult it is to live in a foreign country, number one, but then to start a business. So appreciate you sharing that. That's it rings very true. How about the greatest blessing thus far? And that's probably a harder question because there's so many, but what would you say? I'd pick one.
I mean, I think for me, just going out to the land and seeing the jobs that we've provided for different people, the ladies sorting the coffee, the people that have come to help run the coffee through the mill, Whit, who is becoming our master roaster. It's just really fun to just walk through that and see the jobs that we've provided. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I mean, Rebecca's young. She hasn't hit 50 yet, but I just hit 51. And it just feels good to have some people working alongside of us that are just young and are full of energy. Whit is 25. He's ready to conquer the world. And so it's great to have his energy there, which we need. And Lopa, even though he's approaching 50, he and his wife still have an incredible amount of energy and stamina. So yeah. The blessing also is just the adventure. I was just mentioning, you kind of run into these problems, starting a business in a foreign country. It's also really adventurous trying to start something in a foreign country. So I guess the risk factor goes up, and I guess the excitement of, is this going to work or not, kind of goes up as well.
Yeah. Well, you just need to drink more coffee, Ryan. That's all there is to it.
Yes, I get my quota for the day and a little more. Got plenty of coffee to drink around here.
So what advice would you give to anybody thinking along similar lines? Just what would you say to them? And I'd love to hear from both of you, because this is the first time we've ever had a husband-wife team in the conversation together. And I love the dynamic because you're both seeing things the same but not the same. And I really appreciate Rebecca having you on in particular to give us just your perspective, but just talk to our audience a little bit. If I were you, I would turn and run. What's your
Sometimes that would be the answer.
Maybe. No, I think just if you feel that nudge and you feel like maybe God's calling you to do something that's out of your comfort zone or that sounds a little challenging, but you feel like that's what God's calling you to, I would say just take that leap of faith and do it. Yeah, because who knows where this will end up, but I think that's the best place you can be is right in God's will, right?
Yeah, and you take a step in faith, he'll meet you every time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not the way you envision, right? But he'll definitely meet you. So excellent.
Right.
Ryan, how about parting words of advice for our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I can honestly say there's no way on earth I'd be doing this without my better half. And, she brings wisdom to the table. I mean, we bump heads quite a bit, when it comes to making decisions. But through it all, I could not be doing this at all without her advice. She brings the equilibrium and brings me back when I need to be pulled back, pushes me forward when I need to be pushed forward. She has a very important role in the business, in marketing. And so, yeah, I'm just thankful for that. My advice would be make sure your relationship is with God and your wife there's lots of effort going into that love relationship with God and your wife or your spouse. Because if either of those fall apart, so will your business or your ministry, right?
Yeah. That's great advice. And I'm starting to make mental notes here that wherever possible, I'm going to see if the spouse, not always a wife, but the spouse will join us, because I think that adds a tremendous dimension of reality. That it's a family business. I mean, there's no way around it, regardless of the roles that you assign. So I really appreciate you saying that. And it is true. I mean, if our relationship with God is weakened, if our relationship with our spouse is weakened, everything else begins to look different, feel different. So very good. Yeah. So can they learn about you on the website? Is it Seed of Hope? What's the address?
So yeah, we have a website for the dorm, actually. It is seedofhopethailand.org.
Okay.
And that's one of the things on my to-do list is to add a coffee tab on there. So right now it just talks about the dorm, but I do need this will get me in gear to get that done, to add the coffee tab, just sharing about the coffee side of it.
So seedofhopethailand.com is where they would go to learn.
.org.
.org. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, we're going to drive people there. We'll put that in the show notes, and really appreciate you spending time with us. It's been fun getting to know you a little bit. Look forward to maybe some more personal time and helping you guys in the business. This whole TriVenture thing that you guys have gone through with us is meant to be with you, to continue to support you and to encourage you and try to build tools based on what you say you need. So please keep us in the loop, so to speak.
I can speak for both of us that we so appreciate everything that you guys have done in your teaching, your support, Legacy Ventures, helping with the capital raise. We are just so thankful for you guys and what you do.
Yes.
That goes both ways. So we appreciate it. So thanks for being with us. And we look forward to, this is pretty early stage. I'd love to get you back on periodically and tell us more what's happening. And as we watch you grow and learn about what God is doing, that's the ultimate point. So we call it BAM Stories, right? What's he doing and what's he doing in and through you guys. So thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks
Thank you.
for having us.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Business as Mission podcast. We invite you to become part of the story by supporting the BAM podcast at patreon.com/BAM Stories. There's a link in the notes with this episode. For more information, go to thirdpathinitiative.com or triventure.com. Please share this podcast and give us a review wherever you listen.